The World Rapid Play Championship took place in Doha, Qatar, and it's over. You probably know the winner by now. Nevertheless, I'd like to show you a few highlights. So I'm going to do it in a couple of videos. There's some really interesting stuff. So the first game I'd like to look at is from round 2. David Paravyan against Magnus Carlsen. So here we go. Carlsen has won the World Rapid Play Championship on 5 previous occasions. Could he make it a 6th? Let's have a look. He's playing black here. Knight c3. So very interesting that Carlsen is playing with knight c6. Would you go for a Kalashnikov or a Sveshnikov? But knight c3 is one of those annoying moves which tries to sidestep, for example, the Kalashnikov. And e5 is my recommendation in my repertoire. But Carlsen goes for e6 instead. And of course, a very decent move. There's lots of good moves. g6 is also possible. And Paravyan then steps back into an open Sicilian. And Carlsen just plays a normal Taimanov with queen c7. And this could very easily head into a Scheveningen. For example, after castles and then d6. But Paravyan plays it with a slight twist. He goes for this early knight b5. And this is about to lead into a really sharp position. Of course, this would lead into a Scheveningen with a6 and the knight going back to d4. But Paravyan plays g4. Now, if in this position black just castles, then this can lead to a very favourable kingside attack. You get in f5 really quickly. This is very dangerous for black. So Carlsen knocks the knight back. And again, instead of castling, he reacts in the centre very quickly, exploiting the fact that this pawn is on g4 already. Plays e5, so it gets very tactical now. So you can see that these pieces attack the pawn on g4. The queen is attacked. Steps back here. Now that offers the pawn on g4. And if you're going to play like this with black, then I think it's important to take it. Otherwise, again, g5 is happening too quickly. So knight takes g4 from Carlsen. Now he thought for 2.5 minutes over that move, so obviously not entirely sure about this position. Improvising to a certain extent. Bishop takes. Now, if bishop takes, then queen g2 is rather uncomfortable for black because the queen is going to take on g7. But Carlsen flicks in this move, e takes f4. And that means if bishop takes, then in this position the queen can step to c8. And this isn't so bad for black, actually. This is playable. I mean, this is very complicated. Bishop takes bishop. So pawn takes bishop. All these Zwischenzüge, these in-between moves. So the queen is threatened. So if queen takes, then a check. And this is better for black. Black is actually a pawn up in that position. So that's why the check is thrown in. So that displaces the king. And then queen takes. So Carlsen does the same. He also displaces the king. So neither king is very safe. We can take stock. Carlsen with black is a pawn up. However, this knight has a fantastic square on d5. Then again, this is a pretty good piece, the bishop. White has pretty good compensation for the pawn, as the knight is so strong. Nevertheless, with the king in the middle and that rook opposite, feels like black should be okay. The computer says that white is better here, but I think proving it in a rapid play time control, I should have mentioned the time control, which is 15 minutes plus 10 seconds a move. Proving it in this kind of time control is extremely difficult. I think one advantage that black has here is that the pawn structure is very good. You know, it's pretty solid. Coming back to the computer assessment, the computer wants white to play like this, and then rook f4. But with the rook on e6 feels good enough to me. I think it's very hard to prove white's advantage there. Of course, it's possible to take the exchange with a check, but this bishop is such a strong piece and it holds black's kingside pawns together. Check played, and again, if knight takes, then although the king feels a bit funny here, actually after this rook e5, again black is really solid. The king is going to step back, so it's reasonably safe, and the bishop just holds the kingside pawns. Decent compensation for black, I would say. So after this, with the king stepping up, it looks very strange. Paravyan didn't take, instead played c3. So this is a very important moment in the game. So the question is, how would you play with black? I think we're going to have our first think and drink moment. This is a very important position. So how did Carlsen, playing black, play in this position? So I'll have a drink, you have a think.
I've seen many chessboards in my life, but when I heard about this one, I was keen to see it for myself. It's beautiful and completely wireless, thanks to an integrated battery and Bluetooth connection. For my edition, I wanted pieces that reflect clarity. When I play with them, everything feels natural. Just me, the board, and the game I love. This is my supreme chess set, the Daniel King edition.
It's very important that black's king somehow manages to step back, and you have to get rid of that knight on b6. And Carlsen did that with bishop g5. That is the key move. So the queen is attacked. Whoops, that was a miscue. The queen is attacked. But it also has to take care of that pawn on e4 with the king behind it. So queen d4 would keep hold of the knight and the e-pawn, but then f5, and this is a really dangerous counterattack. So Paravyan had to take the bishop, and then king takes, and that cleared up the situation. Although the king is still in front of the pawns, in fact, white can't really exploit that. And yeah, this is still a problem for white. There was a check, king stepped back, and king d3 also stepping out of the line of the rook and protecting the pawn. But black is solid here. Although white does have a bit of compensation in the form of this active rook looking at these pawns. Remember, Carlsen is a pawn up. And so, you know, white basically is struggling here. You know, Carlsen is improving his position. Active queen. So checking the king. c4. Now the queen could come back to d7, but absolutely typical Carlsen. He's happy to play an endgame where he knows he's better, And although it might be difficult to grind out a win in a classical game, well, in rapid play, Carlsen is very confident of his ability. Rook f1, so white doesn't want that endgame for the moment. Yeah, something like this, well, yeah. You know, white has space and there's a bit of pressure here. It's not going to be so easy for black to convert. So Carlsen plunges down and takes the pawn. And remember, white's king is exposed. Possible to take on f7, but then rook e8 holds. So Paravyan wants to keep it complicated, trying to open up the king. Rook d8 defends. There are all these pieces defending. And then white's king could be in trouble. So c6 keeps the d file closed. Carlsen wants to open the position. And here e5 is the best move. And they would reach an endgame, for example, after this. And, well, black has winning chances here. But it's still tricky. But instead of that, Paravyan took on d5. But that was a fatal mistake because he'd overlooked that, in fact, the counterattack is deadly. That was checkmate. That's how the game ended. I mean, this was a wild game. I don't think that Carlsen was ever in trouble, and his opponent just went wrong in the complications. But I think, you know, once we get to a position like this, you know, white is always going to have difficulties. You know, the best he could achieve was a worse endgame, and that's no fun against Carlsen. So Carlsen actually, after the first day, ended up with 4.5 out of 5. He was on really good form. Sharp games like this, but he was grinding out end games as well, as is his wont. And yeah, after the first day, after the first 5 rounds, he was on 4.5 points along with 4 other players. So things going well. Let's have a look at one of his games from the second day. So he started the second day with a draw against Maxime Vacher-Legrave, and then was played black against Vladislav Artemiev from Russia. And Artemiev, yeah, a dangerous rapid play player, doing well in the tournament. So this is how the game started. And Carlsen now played c6. So a Slav. e3, knight d7, and queen c2. It's one of the most common setups. So you white waits to develop the king's bishop, and you know, you might play b3 first. You might go for one of these sharp lines with g4. Bishop d6 has been played quite a lot by Carlsen previously, but he's also played b6 before. And of course, that's a very reliable move, simply preparing to develop the queen's bishop. Now, it's possible to play bishop d3 or bishop e2, but Artemiev played the super solid c takes d5, and Carlsen has had this before. The most reliable move here is just to recapture, and I don't think black has any difficulties at all. Game Carlsen played previously, for example, went like this. It's just a bit dull, a bit dry, and black doesn't have any difficulties here at all. But I'm guessing that Carlsen wanted to, you know, keep things interesting, and exchanged on d5 with, or recaptured on d5 with the e-pawn. But now I think white has the more comfortable position, because it's possible to break straight away with e4, and that puts black under a bit of pressure. So you can't allow e5, so Carlsen exchanged on e4. So these pieces, queen and the bishop, lined up very nicely on this diagonal. So you could say this is a classic attacking position. It's not so nice that the bishop is blocked in by that c-pawn. And I mean, you can play this in very straightforward way. For example, you could just exchange here and play bishop g5. And seems to me that white has the better position, preparing to put the rooks in the middle. Artemiev played knight e5. Again, very straightforward. So threatening, well, potentially to exchange and get through to h7. But the knight is obviously very good on e5. So Carlsen exchanged off. Previously c5 has been played, which is quite a scary move, but black can just about get away with it. But Carlsen took on e5 and then took on e4, exchanging lots of pieces. But you can see this is very pleasant for white. So that bishop looks in both directions. And yeah, the e-pawn carves out some space. So the question is, how does black defend that? If g6, then the bishop comes in. I mean, it's a beautiful attacking position. And then e6, so undermining that pawn. I mean, this plays itself a rook coming to d1. If this is taken, then bishop g6. I mean, this is sort of the ABCs of attacking a kingside position. So Carlsen played h6. Now it's possible just to play something like, bishop f4 and rook in the middle. But Artemiev went for e6. Now, why didn't Carlsen take this pawn? Well, it's possible for white just to play something like bishop e3, and rook in the middle. I mean, white has compensation, but I'm guessing that Carlsen simply wanted to avoid this. And this forces a draw. If pawn takes bishop, bishop takes, and then queen g6, and it's just a draw by perpetual. And so on. I mean, white hasn't got anything better than that. So I'm guessing that Carlsen simply wanted to avoid a draw, and he played queen c7. It's a risky move because, black's king is slightly exposed in this way. But, well, it's very risky because it basically loses material straight away. Risky is not the word. Queen c7 is just a blunder. I'm guessing that Carlsen simply overlooked this. After rook takes, bishop d5. Just winning the exchange. I guess he just overlooked this pin. By the way, if king takes, then this is horrific because the king gets caught in the middle. Rook d1 threatens bishop g6 check. I mean, it's fatal. So Carlsen played here and bishop d5, and he was just the exchange down. Rook here. Well, of course it's possible just to take the rook, but Artemiev played something even stronger. Bishop takes pawn. Because if pawn takes bishop, then check, and then you take the rook, which is obviously absolutely dreadful for black. So Carlsen played bishop d6. Artemiev now took the rook and played queen g6, just maintaining the initiative. Carlsen took a pawn and brought the bishop back, but rook ae1. So just bringing that queen's rook into play. And Carlsen is the exchange down. And he's under pressure, and the game ended like this. f4. Artemiev just went for a straight attack. Absolutely the right way to do it. Really nice, actually. Rook d1. wants to bring the rook in after rook f6. He did bring the rook in anyway. Very nice, really strong attack from Artemiev, just going for it straight away. If the queen is taken, then check and mate. Bishop takes pawn, check. So queen takes bishop, rook takes check, king g1, but this is still a problem. Okay, that holds this bishop for the time being, but queen d5 check, and that was the final move. Of course, if king h7, then rook takes f8, and it's game over as white is a whole rook up. So this was an absolute crush by Artemiev over Carlsen. As I said, I'm guessing that after e6, in an attempt to play for a win, Carlsen found queen c7, but just overlooked this pin. That's my guess. Otherwise, he would have just taken here, and the game, I think, should end in a draw after this, etc. So that meant that, well, Artemiev took the lead. Now, Carlsen recovered after this with 2 wins, but after the second day, after day 2, let's just have a look at those scores. Carlsen found himself in a second position. He had 7 points out of 9. And the 2 leaders were Artemiev and Niemann on 7.5. So after day 2, Carlsen still had a lot of work to do. Now in the next video, I'll show you what happened in day 3.